Hello everybody and welcome to my Ludum 46 post-mortem video, if you will. A lot of the time when I do a Ludum Dare or a game jam, I tend to do a time-lapse or something like that shows the development of the game. Not doing a time-lapse for this one in particular. I've got a lot of time-lapses now. I know it kind of become a tradition, but they take quite a bit of time sometimes just to get all the footage together, and it's a lot of work and hassle. And with this game, I made a lot of mistakes in this particular game jam. It ended up doing okay. We'll get into the results and things like that in a second. But I made a lot of mistakes, so I thought instead of a time-lapse for this particular jam, what I could do is a video kind of talking about this particular game jam, my experience with it, what happened, what went well, what went wrong, and I thought maybe that'd be a bit more interesting this time, because I find it's generally the more interesting ones to talk about are generally the ones where quite a lot of things go wrong, and did a lot of things go wrong. This was quite a frustrating jam. But let's just talk a bit about the game first. So it's called A Car with No Name. That's the name of the game I made for this game jam. The theme for Ludum Dare 46 was Keep It Alive. Okay, it's a tricky theme, but quite a cool one with a lot of cool potential. And I decided to make a game about a land speeder that you drove across the desert that was kind of prone to misrepair and would slowly degrade over time. You can kind of see from these GIFs, so you kind of have to get out and fix the car and find wreckage in the desert and use that to help you repair it and so on, right? Kind of inspired a bit by a few different games. Jalopy is a big one for this sort of core concept. You kind of drive a car across Soviet Russia, right? A really old car that you kind of put together yourself from scrap parts. And I wanted to capture that vibe in a way of you repairing things and trying to look after this machine that is yours. Now, there's a lot of problems with this idea for something that you want to make in 48 hours, but we'll talk a bit more about that as we go. Results did surprisingly well for what I was sort of expecting. Rated lowest on on humor, actually, because I wasn't really trying to be funny. It's a weird category, but you'll notice from the others, fun is actually one of the lowest down on here. There's not a whole lot to the game is the main problem with it. But let's actually just show you the game. Here it is, A Car with No Name. In fact, let's make it full screen. OBS will freak out and the screen will go black for a second, but there we go. And yeah, so that little title screen comes up. We've got distance covered, we've got some scrap water, energy bars going, and I can pick this up, and it's got some instructions. You might remember this exact sort of setup from that game I made, where you were also sort of trapped in a desert with a spaceship, and you had to kind of fix it with parts by flying a drone around. Very different gameplay concept, but narratively pretty much exactly the same. Anyway, you find this this clipboard you can pick up and pick down, and when you pick it up, you get this this information about how to play the game, right? So it's a guide to fixing the land speeder, and tells you how to lift the hood and what parts are necessary to keep this alive. So I know that it needs 3 parts. So I go in here and toggle this. I can toggle between the items. See the motor core, the thingy majig, classic engine part, and there's not the third one that's mentioned, which is the psi battery, but I can see that in the ground nearby. So I'm okay, pick that up, put that in here, and it also tells me on there that I can press Q to repair things, assuming I have the available scrap with which to repair it. Very, very modular vehicle, can just be fixed with any lying around scrap, It's a versatile beast, but it's the motor core we really need fixed up. It's very, very low status here. So if we get that high enough, the smoke will stop coming out of it. And then we should be good to drive on. The more you repair these and the higher the sort of average health of these are, the faster the car's like max speed is, and so on. And like I can also repair the hull of this as well. Oh, but I ran out of energy. Oh, I forgot about energy. Okay, we'll have to start that again real quick. So yeah, there's an energy thing, and that sort of goes down while you're out in the desert, basically as a way to sort of stop you from wandering out too far away from the car and just sort of walking your way across the desert. I guess water could have handled that as well. You can find water in the desert and so on. The energy sort of ticks down as like as you know, so as a repairing thing. You just kind of have to rest in the vehicle. It was a quick way for me to deal with the problem of like, oh, what if they just decided to just like walk like the whole way and don't actually bring the car with them, right? Which I could have done in various ways, but that's the way I did it here. So anyway, let's put that back in there. Let's get that motor core fixed again. And yeah, so then you've got a radar in here that you can then use to locate scrap and water and lots of other things. Well, actually, those are pretty much the only two things, but the hope for the game was that there would be many other things. But if I get in the car here, let's move this out of the way and just sort of pull back, we can sort of drive on. And now the vehicle has cruise control. So what I can actually do is now get off and just come over to, I'll put this over here, look at this radar screen, and I can see this little radar over here that shows me like nearby things. And we can see there was like a red blip down here. If I pull up here, there's like a scrap bit of land speeder that I can kind of take apart, fill up some scrap, use that to repair if I need to, and like the water, we can find water, and that water will like, you know, stop us from dying, and so on. And that's basically it. And you just have to like get that distance travel. You just have to travel to the right, get that distance traveled up, and I was going to have a target number that you had to reach, and then I don't know, some sort of cutscene would play, but in the end I just settled for, it's a game about getting as far as you can, and this is basically just your score, right? And it just goes on forever. I did want it to be about getting to a place, because that was a cornerstone for me, was like a journey, in which a journey does have like beginning, middle, and end. It's not just an endless drive through the desert until you just die. Which has its own like charm, but it wasn't really what I was going for, so it's a shame I didn't really get that going. But the loop of this game basically in the end was just, you drive on, you get water, you get loot whenever it shows up, and otherwise you just sort of chill and enjoy the journey. I wanted other things to do on the car while you were driving, other things to find in the desert was a big thing. None of that stuff and that's kind of the worst thing that can happen, is you're on cruise control thinking about something else and looking at the radar, and then you don't see a rock come in and you slam into it. You can see the rocks on the radar, though they're a bit tricky. And you slam into that, and then that messes with all your parts and your hull and so on. You have to kind of get out and repair the thing. Can I even back this up? It's quite tricky. We can get it to like there. We can still, we can get the hood up and, get in there and repair things. But it's not in a good way. And, we're probably a bit dead. Yeah. But that's basically the game. And you probably feel it's more of a proof in concept than it was of a game in the end. Like the scrap finder has a stats, but if it runs out, I think it pretty much just still works. I don't think you could. I think you can. Oh no, you can't even repair the scrap finder. The bar fills up, but it doesn't do anything. And that's the game. And I even wanted it to be like local multiplayer. I had loads of ideas, but I didn't get them all done because it's 48 hours. So why not? Why didn't I get things for this game done when some of my other LD games actually are quite polished and have quite a lot of features in them, and so on. Why did so much go wrong with this particular thing? Well, I have the project open here, and one of the biggest problems, one of the biggest sticking blocks for this was just getting the basics of this going. All right, I spent a lot of time just making this ship work, getting collisions to work with the player, and like stepping on a vehicle like this and having it kind of carry the player around, and also having that vehicle be made out of many modular bits. Like all those things were super key to the game design. Like this is what it looks like in its totally destroyed state, but all of these are like different parts, like ship components. Is that Lay entities. Which one can I click on these? Oh no, those components. I can't remember. A ship hull. There we go. So you can see I can kind of click on like bits of the hull. And like that's a separate one, probably in a different layer. And the floor itself is its own thing, and so on, right? Getting that to work, getting it all to rotate as one and stick together, was actually really tricky. A lot trickier than I thought it was going to be, because the really simple way of just like, when it's on there, you just kind of adjust the player's X and Y by wherever this is fine until you have an angle involved. Hey, the moment you start rotating something like that, which in some of these, I don't know, somewhere in all these functions is like the code I used to do that. I think I ended up having to write like 3 different types of like move part and stuff. Yeah, we did this kind of stuff. You saw this commented out junk. There's like length dir X and length dir Y and angle difference, and trying to work out the correct thing to put in here took a long time, a lot of MS Paint figuring out, and a lot of effort, and there's so many bugs with it even now, and like you could fall out of the ship and all kinds of stuff, and I was stuck in it for hours and hours and hours, and it took up like the majority of the jam, honestly, just fixing all of that basic stuff. So that didn't help, right? that didn't help, but that's not the only thing. That's not, and I don't think it's really the key lesson, is because it's hard to predict what's gonna take lots of time. I thought that was going to be easier than it was, and it wasn't, and fair enough, it was harder. But I don't think that was the key problem with this idea. Like, I think the idea, the game idea was flawed for a game jam, for a 48-hour game jam. And I've made this mistake before. Made this mistake with another game, I'll bring it up, called All Become One. If anyone watched this Ludum Dare entry of mine, where I tried to make like a little god game where you had like a village of little people that kind of managed themselves, and you had all these like abilities, and you could like turn things into life force that you used to channel spells to make more people and so on. And it ended up like there was not really much game, and by the end of it, it became kind of like a weird kind of bad like base defense game where you would get attacked by things, when really what I was going for in this was just a systemic thing that would have fun emergent properties and emergent situations and things that could occur just by experimenting with it in a kind of sandbox way. And the same was sort of true in this, in that I wanted to have a lot of systems, a lot of things you could find in the desert, lots of interesting decisions and interesting moments that would play off of dynamic interactions. And you know what? I think it really works for that first minute or so of gameplay, where you're picking up the clipboard and like, looking at like, right, how does this work? Open the hood, flip the hood, and put the things in. And I think a lot of the feel for that came out really well. And I really liked that. And then when you drive on and start performing the actual game loop, it's not that interesting. There's not much to discover and so on. Some of that is just a lack of content, but like you need a lot of stuff to make a game like this work. A lot of stuff, and the same is true for this. In order for the systems and what's interesting about them to start coming into the game and really feeling them, you need to build so many systems. Because they all need to start playing off of one another and combining to create a kind of, a simulation of sorts that kind of, once you understand its rules and so on, interesting things can happen with it. Just by, you push on it in a certain direction, interesting things can happen in systemic and emergent ways. Kind of like, in Breath of the Wild or whatever, you set like a log on fire and you push that log into a bunch of enemies, and that kind of thing relies on, that moment relies on so many systems, right? You have to be able to cut trees down, you have to be able to set them on fire, the things on fire have to be able to hurt other things, and those things need to apply to all entities, right, of all description. And this game was very much built in that way. I have a P entity that has like children that like span off into the big things, and they like handle pretty much like everything in the game, which allows us a modularity. And I've become really enamored with this way of building games and systems, building a P entity and developing in that way, that I keep trying to make these games, but they're not good for a jam environment. So let this be a tale of caution to you if taking part in a game jam anytime soon. Try to avoid games that rely on emergent fun that is derived from the interplay of multiple systems. When that kind of thing tends to require a lot of systems that are very fleshed out, very polished in feel, in order to really have that payoff. It's possible that if I didn't put as much time into making each system like feel really nice, maybe I'd get enough systems done that you get more interesting things out of it. And if I focus on everything just sort of looking a bit rougher, maybe I'd have gotten more done. I don't know, but generally my takeaway is that these kind of games are just insanely difficult to make for a game jam. Similarly, like one of the first lessons I did with one of the first jam games I ever made, I made like a game with levels in it, right? And it's hard to build a lot of content for a game that's 48 hours. How do you go build like a satisfying beginning, middle, and end? That's a very traditional struggle with game jams, right? And they often sort of cut off very abruptly, or once they sort of explore a few ideas, and generally most jam games come across as a proof of concept for that reason. That's a harder to avoid problem, and not as a colossal one, I don't think, as trying to make a game that is endlessly fun just off of these systems, because that same problem rears its head of you've only got 48 hours, but your game, I think, when you're trying to do this, can feel a lot emptier than a game where you only had 4 or 5 levels, but they prove the point really, really well. If you make a game based on systems and you only have 4 or 5 systems when the game really needs like 30 to really play off each other and be super interesting, then you're going to struggle. I had some other things I was going to talk about with this game, but I think honestly there I've covered the main things I think are interesting to talk about with this. So I'm going to leave it there. I've talked for like 18 minutes straight. Thanks for listening if you did, for whatever reason. Thank you for stopping by, those that did come to check out that particular game jam. It was a lot of fun. It was deeply frustrating because I got blocked on so many issues for such a long time. But as I said, I don't think that was the core problem. I think the core problem was the idea, which is an idea I love. I still love the game idea, but it's not well suited to 48-hour game jams. These are the kind of games that really grow into their own over time, as you add more and more and more systems and have them interplay with one another, and you sort of discover the game in a few ways. You have you steer it, but you sort of discover the fun in a lot of ways, and it's difficult. Okay. Yeah, I don't know how else to put it or how else to explain it. There was no music in the game, but I kind of based the name of the game on this song, A Horse Is No Name, that I quite like, that it's really fitting for it. Driving through the desert on a horse with no name, it kind of fits the themes of the game. So I just said people can listen to that in the absence of any music or sound effects, because I didn't get time. But yeah, so be wary of systemic games, and be wary of trying to stick objects to one another if they have to rotate. That was really, really tricky. I know how to do it now in future, but yeah, beware. It's not as easy as maybe you might think. Thanks for watching, guys. Catch you all next time. Thank you, of course, and as always, to my amazing Patreon supporters, without whom I couldn't be doing any of this work. A huge shout out in particular, and in no particular order, to the following cool kids: Bowser the Dog, Zinan May, Robert Churches, Rovan Darlin, Zephia Flame, Daka Dondago, Max M, Bertie T, Relentless Rex, Do What Doobie, Jason, Dark Rider 0318, James Siggins, James L. Anderson, Hare, Hyungjin, Rupinder, Rene Dam, Scott Matthews, Leo, Tyler Hubble, Maria Celesta Oliveira Frailing, Joran Pater, Cabbage Pants, Gilberto Cisneros, Figgy, Mark Burgess, John Harwood, Zach Collett, Goose, Caleb Franklin, Troy Mera, Alex Schenkel, Wilfredo Landera, Carter Green, Justin Adega, Julian Paul, and Keza Ho. Thank you all ever so much, and thank you, of course, for watching. Catch you all next time.